The orange cat was found dying by the lake, but the reason it was there broke the man's heart. The morning mist still clung to the surface of Lake Serenity, a shimmering veil that obscured the far shore. Art McKinley, a man of 72 years, with a weathered face that spoke of a life lived outdoors and a heart softened by time, walked his usual route along the lake's edge. His old Labrador, Gus, a lumbering, gray-muzzled companion, ambled beside him, his tail wagging with a gentle rhythm that matched Art's own steady pace. They did this every morning, rain or shine, a ritual that had become as much a part of Art's day as the sunrise itself. Lake Serenity wasn't just a name, it was a feeling. Nestled in the heart of upstate New York, and the fictional town of Oak Haven, the lake was a haven of tranquility. The town itself was small, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the pace of life was slow, measured by the changing seasons and the gentle lapping of the waves. Art had lived in Oak Haven his entire life, inheriting his modest lakeside cottage from his parents. He'd spent his career as a carpenter. His hands, now gnarled with age, had built half the houses in town. He'd been a widower for 10 years, his beloved Martha taken by a swift and merciless illness, leaving a void in his life that only Gus and the quiet rhythm of the lake could partially fill. That particular morning, as the sun began to burn through the mist, casting a golden glow on the water, Gus stopped suddenly, his nose twitching, his ears perked. He let out a low whine, a sound Art rarely heard from the usually stoic dog. "What is it, boy?" Art asked, his voice a gravelly whisper that didn't disturb the morning calm. Gus nudged a clump of reeds at the water's edge, his whine turning into a soft whimper. Art followed his gaze, his heart sinking as he saw a flash of orange fur amidst the green. It was a cat, a large, ginger tom, lying motionless, half submerged in the shallow water. Art knelt down, his old joints protesting with a chorus of cracks and pops. He gently pushed aside the reeds, revealing the cat's full form. He was soaked, his fur matted and muddy, and his breathing was shallow and ragged. One of his front legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and a dark stain of blood colored the water around him. "Oh, you poor thing," Art murmured, his voice thick with concern. He reached out a tentative hand and stroked the cat's head. The cat didn't flinch, didn't even open his eyes. He was barely clinging to life. Art knew he couldn't leave him there. He might be old, his back might ache, and his heart might be weary, but he couldn't turn his back on a creature in need. He carefully scooped the cat up in his arms, cradling him like a newborn baby. The cat was surprisingly heavy, a solid weight of muscle and bone, even in his weakened state. "Come on, Gus," Art said, his voice strained with the effort. "We need to get him to Doc Peterson." Gus, sensing the urgency in his master's voice, fell into step beside him, his usual playful demeanor replaced with a quiet concern. The walk back to Art's cottage seemed longer than usual, each step a heavy thud in the silence of the morning. Art's mind raced, wondering what had happened to the poor creature. Had he been hit by a car, attacked by another animal, lost and abandoned? The questions swirled in his head, unanswered and unsettling. He focused on the weight in his arms, the faint rise and fall of the cat's chest, a fragile reminder of the life he was trying to save. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the dew-kissed grass. Oak Haven was slowly waking up, the sounds of birdsong and distant lawnmowers filling the air. But for Art, the world had narrowed to the small, orange bundle in his arms, a fragile life hanging in the balance. He reached his cottage, the familiar scent of pine and old with a small comfort in the midst of his worry. He had to act fast. Doc Peterson's veterinary clinic was a small, unassuming building on the edge of Oak Haven, a place Art had visited countless times with Gus over the years. The familiar scent of antiseptic and animal fur filled the waiting room, a scent that usually brought Art a sense of calm, but today, it only heightened his anxiety. Sarah Peterson, Doc Peterson's daughter, and a skilled vet in her own right, greeted Art with a warm smile. She was a young woman, in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle touch that had earned her the trust of every pet owner in Oak Haven. She'd taken over the practice from her father a few years ago, and it still bare the name Peterson's Vet Clinic. "Art, what's wrong? Is Gus okay?" she asked, her smile fading as she saw the limp form in Art's arms. "It's not Gus, Sarah. I found this cat down by the lake. He's in bad shape." Sarah's eyes widened, and she quickly ushered Art into an examination room. She gently took the cat from Art's arms and laid him on the stainless steel table. The cat didn't stir. Sarah worked with a practiced efficiency, her hands moving swiftly and surely as she examined the cat. She checked his breathing, his pulse, his eyes. She carefully palpated his injured leg, her brow furrowed in concentration. Art watched, his heart pounding in his chest, Gus whimpering softly at his feet. "He's been through a lot, Art," Sarah said finally, her voice grave. "He's got a fractured leg, several deep lacerations, and he's severely dehydrated. He's also in shock. I'm surprised he's still alive." "Can you save him?" Art asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah hesitated. "I can try, Art. I'll do everything I can. But I have to be honest, it's going to be touch and go. He's lost a lot of blood, and the infection could be setting in. It'll require surgery, medication, and round-the-clock care." Art didn't hesitate. "Do it. Whatever it takes." Sarah nodded. "Okay. I'll need to run some tests, get him stabilized, and then we'll schedule the surgery. It's going to be expensive, Art." Art waved his hand dismissively. "Money's not the issue, Sarah. Just save him." He'd lived a frugal life, saving diligently for his retirement. He had enough put away, and he couldn't think of a better way to spend it than on saving this creature's life. Sarah smiled, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "You're a good man, Art. Okay, let's get started. I'll keep you updated." She began to prepare the cat for surgery, her movements precise and efficient. Art watched for a moment, feeling a strange mix of hope and helplessness. He stroked the cat's head one last time, whispering words of encouragement he wasn't sure the cat could even hear. "Hang in there, fella," he murmured. "You're going to be okay." He left the clinic with Gus, the waiting room now empty and silent. The sun was high in the sky, the morning mist long gone. The world outside seemed to carry on as usual, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. Art felt a profound sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. He walked home slowly, his mind replaying the events of the morning. He couldn't shake the image of the injured cat, his limp body, his shallow breathing. He felt a connection to the creature, a responsibility he couldn't explain. He had no idea who the cat belonged to, or how he'd ended up by the lake. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to abandon him. He was going to fight for him, just as Sarah was fighting for him in the operating room. He owed him that much. The surgery was long and arduous, Sarah later told Art, but successful. The cat, whom Art had started calling Rusty due to his vibrant orange fur, had pulled through, though he was still weak and heavily sedated. Sarah recommended keeping Rusty at the clinic for a few days for observation, but Art insisted on bringing him home. "He'll be more comfortable here, Sarah," Art argued, his voice firm. "I can give him the round-the-clock care he needs. And besides," he added with a faint smile, "Gus is missing him already." Sarah, seeing the determination in Art's eyes, finally relented. She knew Art was capable and, perhaps more importantly, she knew he cared deeply for the cat. She provided him with detailed instructions on how to administer Rusty's medication, change his bandages, and monitor his condition. She also gave him a special liquid food to feed Rusty through a syringe, as he was still too weak to eat solid food. Bringing Rusty home felt like a victory, a small step forward in a long and uncertain journey. Art had prepared a cozy space for him in the spare bedroom, a room that had remained mostly in use since Martha's passing. He'd placed a soft, comfortable bed on the floor, along with a litter box, water bowl, and a few toys, though he doubted Rusty would be interested in playing anytime soon. The first few days were challenging. Rusty remained mostly unconscious, his body limp and unresponsive. Art diligently followed Sarah's instructions, administering medication, changing bandages, and feeding him the liquid food every few hours. He talked to Rusty constantly, his voice a soothing murmur, telling him stories about his life, about Martha, about Gus, about anything that came to mind. He hoped that somewhere, beneath the layers of sedation and pain, Rusty could hear him, could feel his presence, could know that he wasn't alone. Gus, surprisingly, was incredibly gentle with Rusty. He would lie quietly beside the cat's bed, his large head resting on his paws, his eyes watching Rusty with a concerned expression. He seemed to understand that Rusty was fragile and needed protection. Art found himself spending most of his time in the spare bedroom, sitting beside Rusty's bed, reading, or simply watching him breathe. He hadn't felt this needed, this purposeful, in years. Caring for Rusty had given him a new focus, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It was a demanding task, physically and emotionally draining, but it was also strangely fulfilling. One evening, as Art was changing Rusty's bandages, he noticed a faint twitch in the cat's tail. He held his breath, watching intently. Then, Rusty's eyes flickered open, revealing two golden orbs that stared up at Art with a dazed and focused gaze. "Hey there, fella," Art whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Welcome back." Rusty blinked slowly, then closed his eyes again. But it was enough. It was a sign that he was fighting, that he was still there. Art felt a surge of hope, a wave of relief that washed over him. He stroked Rusty's head gently, tears welling up in his eyes. "You're going to make it, Rusty," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a fighter, and I'm here for you, every step of the way." From that moment on, Rusty began to show signs of improvement. He started to eat more, to move around a little, to even purr faintly when Art stroked him. The road to recovery was still long, but Art knew, with a certainty that warmed his heart, that they were on the right path. He had found a friend, a companion, in the most unexpected of places, and he was determined to give him the best life possible. As Rusty slowly regained his strength, Art's curiosity about his past grew stronger. He couldn't shake the feeling that Rusty had belonged to someone, that he had been loved and cared for before his accident. The way Rusty responded to human touch, the way he purred when petted, suggested a familiarity with people, a history of companionship. Art started his investigation in the most obvious place, the local animal shelter. He visited the Haven Animal Rescue, a small, volunteer-run organization, and spoke to the director, a kind, middle-aged woman named Brenda. He described Rusty in detail, emphasizing his distinctive orange fur and his friendly, though now cautious demeanor. Brenda checked her records, but there were no reports of missing cats matching Rusty's description. "We've had a few strays come in recently," she said, "but none of them are Orange Toms. It's possible he came from another town, or that his owners haven't reported him missing yet." Art left the shelter feeling slightly discouraged, but he wasn't ready to give up. He decided to take a more direct approach. He designed a simple found cat poster, featuring a photograph of Rusty taken while he was sleeping, as he was still wary of the camera, and a brief description. He printed dozens of copies and began posting them around Oak Haven, on telephone poles, in shop windows, at the community center, and even at the local diner, a popular gathering spot for the town's residents. He also started talking to his neighbors, asking if they had seen Rusty before or knew of anyone who had lost an orange cat. Oak Haven was a small town, and word of mouth was often the most effective way to spread information. He spoke to Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived next door and spent her days tending her garden, to Mr. Johnson, the retired postman who knew everyone in town, and to the young couple who had recently moved in across the street. Most people were sympathetic and helpful, offering words of encouragement and promising to keep an eye out. But no one recognized Rusty. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air, a mystery washed ashore by the lake. Art even revisited the spot where he had found Rusty, hoping to find some clue, some sign of what had happened to him. He searched the area carefully, looking for anything that might be relevant, a broken collar, a piece of clothing, anything at all. But the lake remained silent, its surface reflecting the sky, offering no answers. The lack of progress was frustrating, but Art refused to be disheartened. He knew that finding Rusty's owner, if he had one, was a long shot, but he felt a responsibility to try, to exhaust every possible avenue. He owed it to Rusty, and he owed it to himself. He had a feeling, a deep-seated intuition, that Rusty's story was more than just a case of a stray cat getting injured. There was something else, something hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered, and Art was determined to find it. Days turned into weeks, and Rusty's recovery continued steadily. He was now able to walk, albeit with a slight limp, and his appetite had returned with a vengeance. He was still cautious, still a little wary of strangers, but with Art and Gus, he was affectionate and playful, his purr a rumbling engine of contentment. The spare bedroom had become Rusty's domain, and Art had filled it with toys, scratching posts, and a towering cat tree that Rusty loved to climb, surveying his kingdom with a regal air. One afternoon, Art was at the Oakhaven General Store, picking up groceries and a new bag of cat food. Rusty had developed a particular fondness for the salmon flavor. When he overheard a conversation that made his heart skip a beat. Two women were chatting by the checkout counter, their voices carrying across the small store. One of them, a middle-aged woman with short, curly hair, was talking about a friend who had recently moved away. "It's such a shame what happened to poor Margaret," the woman was saying. "Losing her house in that fire, and then having to move in with her daughter all the way down in Pennsylvania. She was heartbroken about leaving Oakhaven." "I know," the other woman replied. "And she was so worried about her cat. She searched everywhere for him." But Art's ears perked up. He cautiously approached the women, his shopping basket forgotten. "Excuse me," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. You mentioned a cat. Was it an orange cat, by any chance?" The women looked at him, surprised. The woman with the curly hair nodded. "Yes, it was. A big, ginger Tom. Margaret adored him. His name was Leo." Art felt a jolt of electricity run through him. Leo. The name resonated, somehow. It felt right. "I found an orange cat by the lake a few weeks ago," Art explained, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "He was badly injured. I've been taking care of him." Could it be Margaret's cat?" The women exchanged a look of astonishment. "It's possible," the first woman said. Margaret described Leo as having a small white patch on his chest, just under his chin. "Does your cat have that?" Art thought for a moment. He hadn't noticed a white patch, but Rusty's fur had been matted and dirty when he found him. "I'll have to check," he said. "Could you give me Margaret's contact information? I'd like to talk to her." The women readily agreed, providing Art with Margaret's phone number and her daughter's address in Pennsylvania. Art thanked them profusely, his mind racing. He rushed home, his groceries almost forgotten, his heart pounding with anticipation. He found Rusty napping on his cat tree, bathed in a ray of sunlight. Art approached him gently, stroking his fur. He carefully examined Rusty's chest, parting the thick orange fur. And there it was, a small, almost imperceptible patch of white fur, hidden beneath the rest. Art felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He was almost certain now that Rusty was Leo, Margaret's beloved cat. He imagined Margaret's grief, her desperate search for her lost companion. He had to contact her, to let her know that her cat was alive. He went inside and, with trembling hands, dialed the number the women had given him. A woman answered, her voice sounding tired and strained. "Hello," Art said. "My name is Arthur McKinley. I live in Oakhaven. I believe I may have found your mother's cat, Leo." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, a gasp. "Leo? Is he alive?" Art explained everything, describing how he had found Rusty by the lake, his injuries, his recovery. He could hear the woman's voice breaking with emotion as he spoke. "Oh, thank God," she said, her voice choked with sobs. "My mother has been heartbroken. She's been blaming herself, thinking he perished in the fire. This is the best news I could have hoped for." Art arranged to video call Margaret the next day, so she could see Rusty for herself. He hung up the phone, feeling a profound sense of relief and joy. He had found Rusty's owner, he had solved the mystery. He had given a grieving woman a reason to hope again. But that night, as Art was preparing Rusty's dinner, he noticed something was wrong. Rusty was listless, refusing to eat. He was breathing rapidly, and his body felt hot to the touch. Art's heart sank. He immediately called Sarah Peterson, who instructed him to bring Rusty to the clinic immediately. The examination revealed a setback. The infection from Rusty's original injuries had flared up again, his body weakened by the stress of his ordeal. Sarah administered antibiotics and fluids, but she warned Art that Rusty's condition was serious. "He's a fighter, Art," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But he's been through so much. We'll do everything we can, but you need to be prepared." Art stayed with Rusty at the clinic late into the night, stroking his fur, whispering words of comfort. He felt a crushing sense of despair. He had come so close to reuniting Rusty with his owner, only to have him snatched away by illness. It felt cruel and fair. He thought of Margaret, waiting anxiously for the video call, her hopes raised by the possibility of seeing her beloved Leo again. He didn't know how he would tell her, if Rusty didn't make it? The glimmer of hope he had felt earlier that day had been extinguished, replaced by a chilling fear. The next morning, Art sat by Rusty's side at the clinic, his hand resting on the cat's still form. Rusty was stable, but weak, his breathing shallow and labored. Sarah had done everything she could, and now it was a waiting game. Art felt helpless, his heart heavy with worry. He knew he had to make the video call to Margaret. He couldn't put it off any longer. He took a deep breath and dialed the number, his hands shaking. Margaret's daughter answered, her face appearing on the screen, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "Hello, Mr. McKinley," she said. "Mom is here, waiting." She is so excited. Art swallowed hard. I have some bad news," he said, his voice trembling. He explained Rusty's sudden decline, the renewed infection, his uncertain prognosis. He saw the hope drain from Margaret's daughter's face. She turned to her mother, who was sitting beside her, out of view of the camera. Art could hear her whispering, her voice filled with sorrow. Then, Margaret's face appeared on the screen. She was an elderly woman, her face lined with wrinkles, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. But there was a strength in her gaze, a resilience that surprised Art. "Mr. McKinley," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you for calling. And thank you for taking care of Leo. Even if he doesn't make it, I'm grateful that he wasn't alone, that he had someone who cared for him." Art was deeply moved by her words. He held the phone closer to Rusty, so Margaret could see him. "He's a fighter, Margaret," he said. "He's still hanging in there." Margaret looked at Rusty, tears streaming down her face. "Leo," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Oh, my sweet Leo." Rusty, as if hearing her voice, stirred slightly. He opened his eyes, his gaze flickering towards the phone. He let out a faint, raspy meow. Margaret gasped. He knows me," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "He remembers me." Art felt a surge of hope. He spent the next hour talking to Margaret, learning about Leo's past, about her life with him. He learned that Leo had been her constant companion for 15 years, a rescue cat she had adopted as a kitten. He had been her solace after her husband had passed away, her furry shadow, always by her side. The fire had been a devastating blow. It had started in the kitchen, a faulty appliance sparking a blaze that had quickly engulfed the house. Margaret had managed to escape with only the clothes on her back, but Leo had been trapped inside. She had searched for him frantically, calling his name until her voice was hoarse, but he was nowhere to be found. The firefighters had told her it was too dangerous to go back inside. She had been forced to move in with her daughter, miles away from Oakhaven, her heart broken, believing Leo had perished in the flames. She had never given up hope, but the passage of time had dimmed her optimism. Art listened intently, his heart aching for Margaret. He realized that finding Rusty, saving him, had been more than just an act of kindness. It had been a lifeline, a connection to a past that Margaret had thought was lost forever. As they talked, Art noticed a change in Rusty. He seemed to be responding to Margaret's voice, his breathing becoming more regular, his eyes more alert. He even managed to purr, a faint rumble that vibrated through his weakened body. Sarah, who had been monitoring Rusty closely, came into the room, her eyes widening in surprise. "His vitals are improving," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. It's remarkable." Art looked at Margaret, his eyes filled with tears. "I think he's going to make it, Margaret," he said. "I think he's going to be okay." Margaret wept openly, her face radiant with joy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my Leo." The following days were a testament to Rusty's resilience, and perhaps, the healing power of love and recognition. He continued to improve, slowly but surely, his strength returning with each passing day. Sarah was amazed by his recovery, calling it a miracle. Art continued to video call Margaret daily, allowing her to see Rusty's progress and to talk to him. The bond between them, rekindled across the miles, was palpable. Rusty would perk up whenever he heard Margaret's voice, his tail twitching, his purr growing louder. But as Rusty's health improved, Art found himself grappling with a complex mix of emotions. He was overjoyed that Rusty was recovering, that he had been able to reunite him with his owner. But he also felt a growing sense of sadness, a preemptive grief at the thought of losing him. He had grown to love Rusty, He'd cherish his companionship. The thought of him leaving, of returning to Pennsylvania with Margaret, filled him with a deep sense of loss. He knew it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. Rusty belonged with Margaret. They had a history, bond that predated Art's involvement, but it didn't make it any easier. One sunny afternoon, as Art was sitting with Rusty in the garden, watching him explore the flower beds with a newfound energy, Gus nudged Art's hand with his wet nose, as if sensing his master's sadness. "I'm going to miss him, Gus," Art said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to miss him terribly." Gus whined softly, resting his head on Art's lap. He, too, had grown fond of Rusty, their initial caution replaced by a gentle camaraderie. Art knew he had to talk to Margaret about the logistics of Rusty's return. He dreaded the conversation, but he knew it was necessary. He called her that evening, and they talked for a long time. Margaret was overjoyed at Rusty's recovery, and she expressed her deep gratitude to Art for everything he had done. "I can never repay you, Mr. McKinley," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You saved his life. You gave me back my best friend. He's a special cat, Margaret," Art replied. "I'm just glad I could help." They discussed the practicalities of Rusty's return. Margaret's daughter was planning to drive up to Oakhaven in a few weeks to collect him. Art offered to keep Rusty until then, ensuring he was fully recovered and strong enough for the journey. The conversation was bittersweet, filled with both joy and sadness. Art knew he was doing the right thing, but it didn't make it any easier. The remaining weeks passed quickly. Art cherished every moment with Rusty, taking him for walks by the lake, playing with him in the garden, and simply sitting with him, stroking his soft fur. He knew these were precious moments, memories he would treasure forever. He also started to prepare Rusty for the journey, getting him used to a travel carrier and making sure he had all his necessary medication and supplies. He wanted to make the transition as smooth as possible for him. The day of Margaret's daughter's arrival finally came. Art felt a knot in his stomach as he watched the car pull up in front of his cottage. He greeted Margaret's daughter, a kind, compassionate woman named Susan, and introduced her to Rusty. Rusty, sensing the change in atmosphere, seemed a little apprehensive. But when Susan spoke to him in a gentle voice, he relaxed, allowing her to pet him. Art watched as Susan carefully placed Rusty in the travel carrier, his heart aching. He knew it was time to say goodbye. "Take good care of him," Art said, his voice choked with emotion. "I will," Susan promised. "And thank you, Mr. McKinley, for everything." Art knelt down and stroked Rusty one last time through the bars of the carrier. "Goodbye, fella," he whispered. "I'll miss you." Rusty purred softly, rubbing his head against Art's hand. Art watched as Susan drove away, the car disappearing down the road, taking Rusty with it. He felt a profound sense of emptiness, a void that he knew would take time to heal. The first few days without Rusty were difficult. Art's cottage felt empty, silent. He missed Rusty's presence, his purr, his playful antics. He missed their walks by the lake, their quiet evenings together. Gus, too, seemed to be missing Rusty, his tail wagging less frequently, his eyes searching the empty corners of the house. But Art knew he couldn't dwell on his sadness. He had done the right thing, reuniting Rusty with his rightful owner. He had given them both a second chance at happiness. He received regular updates from Margaret and Susan, telling him how well Rusty was settling in. They sent him photos and videos, showing Rusty exploring his new home, playing with his old toys, and cuddling with Margaret on the sofa. Seeing Rusty happy and loved brought Art a measure of comfort, a sense of peace. One afternoon, a few weeks after Rusty had left, Art received a package in the mail. It was from Margaret. Inside, he found a framed photograph of Rusty, taken before the fire, a beautiful portrait of him in his prime. There was also a handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. McKinley, I wanted to thank you again, from the bottom of my heart, for saving Leo's life. He's brought so much joy back into my life. I can't imagine what I would have done without him. I know how much you cared for him, and I want you to know that he'll always have a special place in my heart for you too. You gave him a second chance, and for that, I'll be eternally grateful. I'm enclosing this photograph of Leo, so you can remember him. And I hope you'll come visit us sometime. You're always welcome here. With heartfelt gratitude, Margaret." Art carefully placed the photograph on his mantelpiece, next to the picture of Martha. He looked at the two images, his heart filled with a bittersweet emotion. He had lost Martha, and now he had lost Rusty. But he had also gained something precious, the knowledge that he had made a difference, that he had touched two lives in a profound way. The following weeks, Art slowly began to adjust to life without Rusty. He resumed his daily walks with Gus by the lake, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of the waves and the changing seasons. He started volunteering at the Oakham Animal Rescue, helping Brenda with the other animals, finding comfort in caring for creatures in need. One crisp autumn morning, as Art was walking Gus along the lake's edge, he noticed a small, orange kitten huddled beneath a bush. The kitten was skinny and shivering, its fur matted and dirty. It looked up at Art with wide, frightened eyes. Art's heart skipped a beat. He knelt down, extending a hand towards the kitten. The kitten hesitated for a moment, then cautiously approached, sniffing Art's fingers. Art gently scooped up the kitten, cradling it in his arms. He felt a familiar warmth, a sense of connection. He knew he couldn't leave the kitten there, alone and vulnerable. "Well, hello there, little one," he murmured, his voice soft and gentle. "Don't worry, you're safe now." He carried the kitten home, Gus trotting beside him, his tail wagging with a gentle curiosity. Art knew he couldn't replace Rusty, but he also knew that he had room in his heart for another creature, another friend. He had learned that love, like the lake itself, was vast and deep, capable of embracing many. He would care the kitten, and if he couldn't find its owner, maybe it had found its forever home. The sun was rising over Lake Serenity, casting a golden glow on the water. A new day was beginning, filled with possibilities, with hope, with the promise of new beginnings. And Art, with a kitten nestled in his arms and a loyal dog by his side, was ready to embrace it.
A stray cat was found bleeding in a trap. No one knew who was behind it. Why was a magnificent large cat found bleeding in a cruel, illegal trap deep in a quiet park? Was it random violence or something more sinister? Follow a determined park ranger whose investigation into the trapping uncovers a shocking secret hidden behind the high fences of a reclusive neighbor's property. A house of horrors that reveals the cat's desperate past. Want to uncover the truth? Subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and listen to the full story now. The sound was wrong, not the usual chatter of squirrels or the call of a distant hawk, but a choked, guttural cry of animal agony that cut through the morning mist hanging heavy in Black Creek Park. Ben Carter, park ranger, paused on his patrol route, straining his ears. It came again, weaker this time, a desperate, strangled sound emanating from the dense woods off the seldom-used service trail near the park's northern boundary. Ben wasn't easily rattled. Years of dealing with everything from unleashed dogs to minor emergencies had seen to that, but the raw pain in that cry sent a chill down his spine. He pushed through the wet underbrush, following the sound, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. He found him near the base of an old, rusted-out park service shed, half hidden by overgrown weeds. It was a cat, but unlike any stray Ben had seen in these woods before. Large, powerfully built, with a thick matted coat that might have once been a luxurious gray or silver, suggesting Maine Coon or a similar mix. This was no feral lightweight. This was a substantial animal, and he was in horrific trouble. His front paw was caught fast in the cruel, serrated jaws of a steel leg-hold trap, the kind Ben knew was strictly illegal in the park, and indeed in most of the state. Blood stained the matted fur around the paw and pooled slightly on the ground beneath. The chain anchoring the trap was bolted crudely to the shed's foundation. The cat's eyes, wide with terror and pain, fixed on Ben as he approached. A low, menacing growl rumbled from deep in its chest, even as its body trembled violently. It had clearly been trapped for some time, exhausted by struggle, but still fueled by adrenaline and fear. Ben stopped, assessing the situation. The trap was brutal, designed to inflict maximum damage. The cat was large, terrified, and potentially dangerous if approached incorrectly. Freeing him wouldn't be easy, and getting him medical attention immediately was critical. Looking at the suffering animal, trapped and bleeding by an illegal device in the quiet woods he was supposed to protect, Ben felt a cold anger rise within him. Who would do this? And why here, in this remote corner of the park? The questions hung unanswered as the cat let out another choked cry, a sound that demanded action. Ben Carter had been a ranger at Black Creek Park for 15 years. He loved the sprawling expanse of woods, trails, and water that served as a green lung for the bustling town bordering it. His job was varied: trail maintenance, visitor assistance, enforcing park regulations, monitoring wildlife, and occasionally dealing with the less pleasant aspects, like illegal dumping or lost pets. He knew these woods intimately, their changing seasons, their hidden corners. The old service shed near the northern boundary was in one such corner, slated for demolition for years, but always pushed down the budget list, largely ignored and rarely visited. He'd seen glimpses of the big gray cat before, brief sightings over the past few months, a flash of movement in the undergrowth, a pair of intense eyes watching him from a distance. He'd noted its unusual size and breed characteristics, wondering how such an animal ended up stray or feral in the park. It seemed too substantial, too domestic somehow, despite its wildness. He'd mentally nicknamed it Bear due to its size. Park regulations were crystal clear. Trapping of any kind was strictly prohibited. The leg-hold trap Bear was caught in wasn't just against park rules, it was illegal for general use in the state due to its cruelty. Finding it here, bolted to a park structure, indicated a deliberate, malicious act, not just carelessness. It wasn't an old, forgotten trap. The bolt looked relatively new. Ben knew freeing a large, powerful animal like Bear from such a trap while it was terrified and in pain was incredibly risky. He radioed his supervisor, Dave Haskins, explaining the situation. Illegal trap. Seriously injured large cat. Possible Maine Coon mix. Location by the Old North Shed. Haskins, pragmatic as ever, told him to wait for animal control backup, equipped with catch poles and potentially tranquilizers. Waiting felt like torture as Bear occasionally thrashed weakly or cried out. Animal control took nearly 45 minutes to arrive, their van navigating the rough service trail. With their help, using a protective shield, a catch pole to secure Bear's head, and eventually a mild sedative administered by the attending officer who had veterinary tech training, they were finally able to carefully release the mangled paw from the trap's jaws. The injury was severe, the bone likely crushed. As the animal control officers prepared a crate for transport to the emergency vet clinic they contracted with, Ben examined the trap and the bolt, securing it. It wasn't random. Someone had deliberately chosen this spot, used this illegal device. Looking at the magnificent cat, now sedated but still breathing shallowly, his beautiful fur matted with blood and dirt, Ben felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't just about rescuing an injured animal. It was about finding who was responsible for this barbaric act within the park he was sworn to protect. He couldn't just hand the cat over and write a report. He felt a professional and personal obligation to investigate. His goal became clear: ensure Bear received the best possible care and uncover who set that trap and hold them accountable. Ben followed the animal control van to the emergency veterinary clinic on the edge of town, run by Dr. Ramirez, a vet known for her dedication and willingness to work with wildlife in difficult rescue cases. The initial assessment was grim. Bear's front leg had multiple fractures, severe tissue damage, and a high risk of infection. Amputation was a possibility, Dr. Ramirez warned, but she'd try to save it. She also noted something interesting. Despite the matted fur and obvious signs of living rough recently, Bear was surprisingly well-nourished underneath it all, his teeth in good condition. "He hasn't been astray for very long, I'd wager," she commented, her brow furrowed. "And he's neutered." This deepened the mystery. Ben covered the initial emergency costs out of his own pocket, supplemented by a small discretionary fund the Park Service had for injured wildlife. Though Bear wasn't technically wildlife, he arranged with Dr. Ramirez to be kept updated. His investigation started back at the old shed. He meticulously searched the area, photographing the trap location, the bolt, the chain. He found faint impressions in the soft earth nearby, maybe partial footprints, but nothing definitive. He did find, tucked partially under a loose piece of corrugated roofing near the shed, a few discarded, inexpensive plastic food bowls recently used, suggesting someone might have been leaving food there, perhaps trying to lure an animal, or maybe feeding one they already kept nearby. He expanded his search along the park boundary near the shed. He found a section where the chain-link fence separating the park from the adjacent properties looked recently bent back, as if someone or something large had pushed through. It wasn't a clean cut, more like forced entry or exit. Ben spent the next few days talking to people. He spoke with hikers who occasionally used the less maintained northern trails. No one reported seeing traps or suspicious activity, though a few mentioned seeing the big gray cat occasionally. He talked to residents whose properties backed onto that section of the park. Most were cooperative, but hadn't seen anything unusual. One resident, Mrs. Gable, complained vaguely about things getting into her trash recently, but hadn't seen who or what. Another, Mr. Henderson, mentioned hearing strange animal noises at night sometimes, but attributed it to raccoons or foxes. No one admitted to setting traps. Bear's recovery at the clinic was slow and fraught with challenges. He remained deeply fearful and mistrustful of humans, reacting with terror whenever someone entered his kennel, especially if they were carrying anything resembling a pole or leash. He huddled at the back, growling low, his pupils dilated. Dr. Ramirez noted he seemed particularly terrified of loud, sudden noises and confined spaces beyond what might be expected from the trapping incident alone. "This cat carries trauma that goes beyond the trap, Ben," she told him. Ben found another trap, not identical, but a similar style wire snare trap, hidden near the bent section of the fence line. It was empty, thankfully, but it confirmed someone was actively and illegally trapping in this area of the park. This wasn't an isolated incident or an old relic. Ben's supervisor, Dave Haskins, grew impatient with the time Ben was spending on the investigation. "We found the traps, we removed them, the cat's being treated. That's where park resources end, Ben," Haskins said gruffly. "Focus on your assigned duties. Trail maintenance backlog isn't getting any shorter. Let the police handle it if they think there's a case, which they probably don't. Ben felt frustrated by the lack of support, but he couldn't let it go. The cruelty, the illegal traps, Bear's strange history and intense fear, it felt connected, important. Feeling stonewalled by his supervisor and hitting dead ends with neighbors, Ben decided to focus on the property immediately adjacent to where he found the bent fence and the second trap. It was a large, secluded property set back from the road, surrounded by a high wooden fence and dense, overgrown hedges. The owner, according to county records, was a Mr. Silas Blackwood, a man known in town mostly by reputation. Reclusive, eccentric, rarely seen. Rumors circulated about him that he collected unusual things, that he had aggressive guard dogs, that he valued his privacy above all else. The property backed directly onto the least accessible part of Black Creek Park. Ben considered his options. A direct confrontation seemed unwise given Blackwood's reputation. He decided on a less direct approach. He drafted a formal-sounding notice on park letterhead, stating that illegal traps had been found within park boundaries near Blackwood's property line, and requesting residents ensure no trapping activities originated from their land. He posted it prominently on Blackwood's gate, hoping it might elicit a reaction or at least serve as a warning. There was no response for several days. Ben continued his patrols, keeping a closer eye on the Blackwood property line, but saw nothing out of the ordinary from the park side. He checked in on Bear at the clinic. The big cat was physically healing. Dr. Ramirez had managed to save the leg, but his mental state remained fragile. He ate only when left completely alone and panicked violently during bandage changes or any attempt at handling, requiring sedation for even basic procedures. Then came the turning point from two different directions. First, Dr. Ramirez called Ben. "We had an incident with Bear," she said, sounding concerned. "During a thunderstorm last night, he went into absolute hysterics in his kennel. Not just fear of the storm, it was sheer terror. He nearly injured himself further thrashing against the bars. But the strange thing was his vocalization. It wasn't just yowling, it was this specific, repetitive, high-pitched shriek. One of my senior techs, who used to work with rescues involved in shutting down puppy mills and hoarding situations, recognized it. She said it's a sound she's heard before from animals kept in long-term, severely stressful confinement, often in stacked cages. Almost simultaneously, Ben received an anonymous email. The subject line was just "Traps in Black Creek." The body of the email was brief. Blackwood doesn't just dislike strays. He collects them and breeds them. Check the old county permits for kennels or exotic pets from years ago. He thinks the park is his private hunting ground to get back runaways. Be careful. The pieces slammed together in Ben's mind with sickening clarity. Bear's size and breed characteristics, his relatively well-fed state suggesting recent captivity, his extreme phobia of confinement, and specific terror responses. The illegal traps set near the boundary fence, the rumors about Blackwood, the anonymous tip. Bear wasn't just a stray who got unlucky. He was almost certainly an escapee from Blackwood's property. And Blackwood wasn't just a recluse. He was likely running an illegal breeding operation or hoarding animals in terrible conditions, using traps to try and recapture escapees or deter them. Ben felt a cold dread wash over him. This was far bigger and darker than just illegal trapping. Bear's suffering was likely just the tip of the iceberg. Other animals were potentially suffering, trapped inside Blackwood's fortress of privacy. His role shifted dramatically once again. He was no longer just a ranger investigating traps. He was the primary witness holding key information about a potentially large-scale animal cruelty and neglect case happening right on the park's border. He knew with absolute certainty that he had to escalate this, regardless of his supervisor's reluctance or the difficulty of penetrating Blackwood's seclusion. His goal now was not just justice for Bear, but rescue for any other animals trapped in Blackwood's hidden world. Armed with this new horrifying hypothesis, Ben knew he needed irrefutable evidence to get authorities to act against someone as reclusive and potentially litigious as Silas Blackwood. His supervisor, Dave Haskins, was predictably resistant when Ben presented his suspicions and the anonymous email. Rumors and an anonymous email, Ben? That's thin. Blackwood keeps to himself, pays his taxes. We can't just go raiding his property based on a maybe. Haskins reiterated his order to focus on park duties, but Ben saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. Illegal activity bordering the park was technically within their purview, even if Haskins preferred to avoid conflict. Ben realized he needed to work through official channels, but also needed to strengthen his case independently. He meticulously documented everything. Dr. Ramirez's reports on Bear's physical and psychological condition, photographs of the traps and their precise locations, the fence damage, the discarded food bowls near the shed, and a printout of the anonymous email. He spent hours digging through old online county records as the email suggested. He found it, a permit application from 15 years ago for a private cattery and kennel, filed by Blackwood, which was denied due to zoning regulations and insufficient facility plans. It wasn't proof of current wrongdoing, but it showed prior intent. He contacted the county animal welfare department directly, bypassing Haskins for now, and spoke to Officer Miller, a seasoned investigator known for her thoroughness. Ben laid out his case, presenting all his documentation and Dr. Ramirez's veterinary opinion, linking Bear's trauma to likely long-term confinement. Officer Miller listened intently. "It's compelling, Ranger Carter," she admitted. "The illegal traps near his property line are grounds for concern, and the vet's assessment adds weight. But getting a warrant to enter Blackwood's property based on this, it's still borderline. We need something more concrete linking the conditions inside to the traps or the escaped cat." Frustration gnawed at Ben. He felt like he was racing against time, imagining other animals suffering just beyond the fence line while bureaucracy moved slowly. He decided to conduct more discreet surveillance of the Blackwood property perimeter from within the park, always staying on public land, using binoculars. He spent hours over several days watching and listening. He didn't see Blackwood, but he did hear things. Occasional bursts of distressed barking or yowling from deep within the property, quickly muffled. He also noticed a delivery truck making frequent stops at the gate, dropping off large quantities of bulk animal feed and supplies, far more than seemed reasonable for just a few personal pets. He documented the truck's license plate and delivery times. His increased presence near the boundary didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Ben was observing from a distance, a large menacing dog, maybe a Cane Corso or Presa Canario, appeared inside the fence, barking aggressively towards him. Moments later, a security camera mounted on a high pole previously hidden by foliage, swiveled to point directly at him. Ben retreated quickly. Blackwood was clearly aware he was being watched. This felt like a major setback. His dark night. Blackwood was alerted, potentially hiding evidence or moving animals. The direct surveillance option was now too risky. Ben felt the pressure intensify. He conferred again with Officer Miller, sharing the information about the bulk deliveries and the guard dog camera confirming Blackwood's high security. Officer Miller agreed this added to the suspicious picture. Okay, Ranger, the frequent bulk feed deliveries might be enough circumstantial evidence combined with the traps and the vet report. Let me talk to the county prosecutor's office. We might be able to argue probable cause for a welfare check warrant based on the totality of the circumstances, especially the illegal trapping intended to retrieve escaped animals. Ben felt a flicker of hope. He provided Officer Miller with his detailed logs and photos. The next step was convincing a judge. He spent the next few days anxiously waiting, visiting Bear at the clinic, whose leg was healing but whose spirit remained deeply wounded. Ben knew that getting inside Blackwood's property was the only way to uncover the full truth and potentially save many more animals like Bear. He prepared himself mentally for whatever a raid might reveal, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. The warrant came through, citing the illegal traps, the evidence suggesting escaped animals, the bulk feed deliveries inconsistent with personal pet ownership, the prior denied kennel permit, and the veterinary reports on Bear's condition. A judge agreed there was sufficient probable cause to inspect Blackwood's property for animal welfare violations. Officer Miller assembled her team, coordinating with local police for backup due to Blackwood's reclusive nature and the presence of potential guard dogs. Ben was asked to accompany them, officially as the park ranger liaison who discovered the initial evidence. The convoy arrived at Blackwood's imposing gate early one morning. Officer Miller announced their presence and the warrant through a speaker. After a tense silence, the gate slowly swung open. Blackwood himself, an unkempt man with suspicious eyes, met them stonily on the porch, denying any wrongdoing but legally obligated to allow the inspection. As the team moved past the main house towards the outbuildings and fenced enclosures partially visible from the park boundary, the smell hit them, an overpowering stench of ammonia, feces, and unclean animal enclosures. The occasional barking Ben had heard became a cacophony as they got closer. Inside several poorly maintained barns and makeshift sheds, they found the grim reality. Dozens and dozens of cats and dogs, including several large breeds and Maine Coon types, similar to Bear, crammed into small, filthy cages stacked one on top of another. Many were emaciated, suffering from untreated injuries, skin diseases, and severe psychological distress. Bowls were empty or filled with contaminated water. It was a large-scale hoarding situation combined with an illegal, unregistered breeding operation run with callous indifference. Blackwood was immediately detained. The scene was declared a major animal cruelty case. Ben felt a mixture of horror at the conditions and grim satisfaction that his persistence had paid off. He scanned the cages, his heart aching for the suffering animals, wondering how many, like Bear, had tried to escape only to be caught in Blackwood's traps. The truth behind the trap that caught Bear was finally sickeningly clear. The rescue operation took hours. Animal welfare officers, veterinarians, and volunteers from multiple rescue groups worked tirelessly to document the conditions and safely remove every animal from Blackwood's property. Over 70 animals, mostly cats and dogs, were seized and transported to shelters and emergency clinics for urgent assessment and care. Blackwood faced a battery of felony charges related to animal cruelty, neglect, and running an illegal breeding operation. The case sent shock waves through the quiet town and spurred a renewed focus on animal welfare laws and enforcement. The Park Service, prompted by the incident, allocated funds to clear the area around the old shed and conduct thorough sweeps for any other forgotten hazards. Bear's recovery took a significant turn once the truth about his origins was known. Understanding his deep-seated fear of confinement and loud noises allowed the clinic staff and Ben to tailor his rehabilitation. He would likely always bear psychological scars, but the immediate terror began to fade. The surprise for the community wasn't just the hoarding discovery, but the realization that the magnificent, aloof stray cat Ben had rescued was a survivor of horrific neglect, his wildness a product of trauma, not inherent nature. Given Bear's size, breed mix, and lingering anxieties, finding a suitable adoptive home seemed challenging. But Ben, who had visited him almost daily, felt an unbreakable bond with the cat he'd saved, the cat whose suffering had exposed so much hidden cruelty. Once Bear was medically cleared, Ben made the decision. He officially adopted Bear himself. His ranger's cabin, located on the edge of the park grounds, offered space and quiet. The transition required immense patience. Bear remained cautious, valuing his space, but slowly, tentatively, he began to show trust. Months later, Ben would find Bear not hiding, but resting on the porch railing, calmly watching the woods, the sunlight catching the silver tips in his now clean, thick fur. He might never be a lap cat, but he was safe, respected, and finally home. For Ben, rescuing Bear became more than just doing his job. It was a profound commitment that brought unexpected companionship and reinforced his belief in the importance of protecting the park and all its inhabitants, both seen and unseen. The discovery sparked by one cat in a trap led to the rescue of many, a quiet victory against cruelty hidden in plain sight, forever changing the ranger and the magnificent survivor he called Bear.